I understand the topic du jour is analytics, and having been a while since I've been at UNM, what was it, Davin? 2013?
2013 was our last reunion. Yeah.
Wow. So it's been a while. So a super exciting topic from at least on paper. We'll go ahead and try to spice it up. And I have been throttled to 30 minutes. So I'll give you a quick background, a little bit about myself and where the Lobo kind of played in. I'll give you some brief analytics intro just based on the time that we've got, kind of how that kind of correlates maybe back in the day. A modern day use case kind of, and some Q&A. We'll leave some good time for Q&A. Does that work?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Right.
And you know, I wonder if we should, I know we've, Elizabeth has asked you to throttle at 30 minutes, but we are still waiting for some of the news folks to join. So I'm wondering if we should pause for just a moment and make sure that we get some of those folks on.
Yeah.
Gabriel, thanks for joining us. Let me text real quick and see if we can. Does that stall you out as I do that?
No.
Okay.
I'm seeing we've got, is it 6 on, or is that just 6 that I'm seeing?
We've got 6 total on, including you and
okay.
me, and so.
I like your dog.
Thank you. His name.
What's your dog's name?
Axel.
Axel, that's great. What kind of dog is that?
He's a teacup Yorkie.
Beautiful. Oh, wow. Looks like the floodgates are open.
Yeah, as I suspected, I'm glad we paused for a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have
we got a quorum.
Folks filtering in a little late, but we have most of our editorial staff on. So thank you for pausing. And
yeah, fantastic. All right, we'll carry forward. And guys, this is super informal, so if there's questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. So from student to full-fledged family at this point, that's my dog trying to get into the picture as well. The Lobo days were way back in '89, going back, but it was a fantastic launch pad to get me into all of these companies in terms of teaching me some basic foundations. And interestingly enough, I just signed on to a brand new company on Friday, and one of the common bonding items that I had with the CEO is that we both were on the advertising staff for our respective newspapers. He was at Tucson. So interesting side note on that regard. I'll jump right into the analytics piece. Way back in 2006, there was a reference to the fact that data was the new oil. That basically, you know, all of this new data that was being generated would be able to give tremendous insights. And that was, you know, a topic of long discussion, but I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion with Google and what it's been able to do, specifically against Madison Avenue, and kind of some of the journey that I took with a big agency, and what some of the digital play has been able to do and overcome a lot of what the old days had brought. But essentially, data is one aspect of all this, and it plays, I'm not talking just on the advertising side, I'm talking to everything. The fact that, you know, you can analyze, you can collect data on just about any given topic, and that can open up tremendous doors. It basically starts with root foundations in terms of your questions and what do you want to answer, what do you want to try to achieve. So a quick flashback that is kind of predating a lot of that Google stuff, obviously. When I started at the Lobo, I'm feeling very, very old talking to you guys about this. We had basically tried something new. The PCs were just coming out. There was lists that you could purchase, and essentially with those lists, we could target restaurants, hair salons, clothing stores, all that kind of stuff. So we'd create direct mail advertising to all of these individuals and do mailers, physical mailers, and essentially start talking about upcoming special editions and do phone follow-up and be able to sell more ads in that regard. Those were kind of the early roots, early seeds of all of this digital type of advertising, but it worked tremendously. And it was an incredible foundation in terms of just a launch pad to all of those companies that I was able to get into. From a use case perspective, again, it's what problem are you trying to solve? What things are you interested in terms of being able to find out? There is all sorts of data out there, as I'm sure you guys already have collected based on your web presence as it stands today, but also being able to, start with some hypotheses in terms of what you want to shape, what you want to do with your audiences, where you want to get them, being able to test out some of those different hypotheses. And once you kind of test it a little bit, that you're able to then scale and roll out on a much bigger basis in terms of what you've learned from those different tests. And I'll pause there because that's kind of one of the key areas in terms of just the overall analytics stepping stone to get there. All right. This is going a little bit faster than I had anticipated, but from a measurement and reporting standpoint, I understand that you guys haven't delved too much into the analytics. Is that true?
Correct.
Yeah. So this is kind of a sample Google Analytic dashboard in terms of all the types of data that would be available to you. So you can start to get a better understanding in terms of what's going on, in terms of what people are searching for, the email activities, the display, the social type of engagement that you're having with your different audiences. Most importantly, how many people are converting, meaning what are they clicking on? How many people are clicking through? What types of quantities, what kinds of volumes you're attracting over a period of time. And that trending piece can be really interesting. You've got different issues, you've got different days, you've got different ads. What's happening over some of those different periods is where you can start to glean a lot of key insights to kind of do what I was talking about in that previous slide in terms of starting to kind of go, well, if we change up either some of the editorial content, change up some of the advertising, how does that impact, the number of readers that we get, the number of conversions that we get? How does that help us build up to some special issues? How does that help build content? And you can test all around that in terms of being able to help you in terms of some of those types of decisions. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. With that, you've got, a lot of different segmentation. So you can start to, create cohorts of different audiences. It might be by age, it might be by major, it might be by editorial content sections of the editorials, things of that nature. So that use case, the illustration here is, I don't know if it still exists, but back in the day, there was some friction between editorial and advertising in terms of working together, that, that there was kind of freedom on both sides to kind of help. But I thought when we worked together in terms of being able to, on special issues was a great example of that in terms of what was the content going to be, what were we trying to shape, and then, building advertising around that essentially enabled more pages, bigger editions, more content, better readership, all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of just a sample seed. I don't know if that's old thinking or stuff that you guys are already doing, but I thought I'd include it anyway. In terms of our data sources, we can go towards weblogs, the Google Analytics dashboards that I was showing you. in terms of being, do you guys already incorporate that? Do you guys already have Google dashboards that you can reference, or is that something that you guys haven't delved into yet?
Megan, I can let you answer for the for the editorial side. I think we have access to it. How much we're using it, I'm not sure. The ad staff is really looking at more about reporting to advertisers on how their ads performed.
Okay, great. So bottom line, at least it's already implemented. So now it's just a matter of going in there and leveraging and harnessing all of that good data.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So again, you've got the options to be able to test with, either together in this example, measure that out, and then be able to scale and roll out accordingly. There's a ton of different resources. I've just kind of sketched out a few here on this slide, and I'm happy to share this deck out. But online training, I'm sure you guys are all aware of. These are, some go-to areas that I like to go to. Some blogs that talk a lot about that and can help you in terms of a process. Not to mention the obvious ones in terms of Google and YouTube. And this is kind of just a deeper dive in terms of LinkedIn Learning as one example. So on the left, you can kind of see an outline of all the things that they would cover. And the fact that you can get certification and all that kind of stuff is super helpful if that's of interest to you in terms of being able to, I'm sure, help you along the career path as well. All right. Timing wise, where am I? All right. Just about the 15-minute mark. So I wanted to leave the majority of this to Q&A.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So as far as knowing what the numbers, like on a bigger scale, like what they mean, kind of like what is a number we should expect to see, or how like an ad should perform, would you be able to tell me a little bit about what to look for in the numbers and analytics?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's going to vary. And a lot of answers, at least from my perspective, are not meant to be evasive in that regard. But it depends on a lot of different factors. It can depend on, in my case, a lot depends on industries that you're targeting. A lot of it depends on what your historical. That's actually the best baseline, is to look at your historical performance. And if you guys have already implemented, the pixels for Google and the tracking IDs, you guys can go back in time and kind of see what happens over time. Trending is a super powerful way to be able to give you some of those benchmarks. So as an example, if you've got, can't believe I'm forgetting, the Frontier, who's been running forever. They're still around, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. You basically, can go back a year, 2 years, and you can start to see seasonality. You can track that against some of your additions, daily runs, special editions, all that kind of all of those kinds of variables to try to get a better picture in terms of where they've outperformed and what the average is, where have they not performed as well. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you guys, we're going to try to save some the rest of the kind of the advertising specific questions towards the end, because we know the editorial staff has a paper to put out today. So we're going to give you all the floor first for asking questions on how this pertains to like news content, or what questions you have about that information, or ways in which you can use that.
And the crowd goes wild.
I mean, I guess maybe the question is to seed that discussion is, what are you using? Are you using any sort of analytics or metrics from social media or anywhere else to track how well your stories are doing, and to help give you some direction in what your direction and coverage?
Yeah, I think another piece to that I'd add is just, from a curiosity standpoint, I mean, what would you like to see more of? What would help you? If you start with your questions in terms of, what have you been thinking about as you're writing, as you're, pulling up the editorial calendar, all of those types of planning sessions, if you could have information that would tell you certain answers, what kinds of questions would you be asking around that? Because I think once you start to understand what your questions are, then you can start to say, okay, what kind of data would help me answer that? What types of data do I already have? And not only is there data that you already have, some of that sometimes, and we use it a lot in our side, is supplementing that data. And I'll give you an example of that. So we'll have a certain number of customers, and within those customers, some customers are better than other customers. So we basically take our best customers and we say, gosh, if we could go find, 2 times, 3 times as more of these profiles, I would love to be able to open up a direct line of communication to them, whether it's targeting them through search or targeting them through social or whatever. We'll go out and we'll purchase data. We'll go out and purchase lists of those type of individuals, and we will target those. So that basically grows your overall audience in terms of who you can talk to. And again, these are kind of advertising specific examples, but I think that can all be translated into the editorial side.
I wonder if you could elaborate on what you mean by targeting them.
Sure. That's a great question. So in a newspaper example that I was just talking about, so let's just say that we're doing a special issue on certain things and we want to target restaurants. And over time, and this may not be the best example, but just run with me for a minute. We know that, certain restaurants around, the campus are usual suspects and people that we can get. But if we wanted to expand to the Metroplex, what cuisines, what zip codes, all of those kinds of things, we could look at historical data and basically say, oh, wow, we're noticing that, stuff in the Heights or, in Old Town, bad examples, but, certain sections of the city are historically performing really well for us. Why don't we focus, since we have limited ad reps or we have limited, and I apologize, I gravitate towards the advertising side just because that's where I've been all my life. But if you can extract that onto the editorial side, but if I have limited ad staff, limited resources of phone calls that I can make within a given week to get as many ads as I can, at least now I know what cuisine, what zip codes, and what restaurants to go target. That's kind of an example of targeting. That was a great question.
And I can see from kind of on the editorial side, a few years back, we covered every single game of the Mountain West tournament baseball. Every single game, we had people out there covering not just our team, but every other team. And so it would have been useful, I think, for the editorial staff to be thinking about in terms of resources, do we want to cover all those games? Are people looking at those stories? Do people care about San Jose playing, San Diego State? Or do they only care about UNM? How does that translate to where we want to put our resources towards for our coverage?
Yeah, I think even looking at if you wanted to start also with, let's look at the past 3 months of stories. What have been the hottest stories? Is there ways to break those stories into cohorts? I don't know how much and how rich your data is, but perhaps you could break it down by what degrees or what concentrations of students from certain colleges are, et cetera. And how do you expand that, or how do you target certain audiences with respect to that?
I know right now, actually some of our stories that historically do the best are our reviews and our opinions. But I wonder, I don't know if there's any way to use analytics to find out or to get methods for how to boost like news stories that are more important than that, like mask mandates or vaccine mandates that are more important than the reviews, but the reviews get the most attention.
I don't know what your tech stack looks like or what data you're collecting, but there just about anything you can dream of is available on the market to be able, I mean, they'll even tell you, you know, where they're reading in a certain story. They'll tell you how far they've read through, all of that kind of stuff. There's proxies for that if you don't have that data. And some of that, what I mean is that, you know, if all of these people are on your site, we can see what is the average time spent. And then you can break that down and get more granular to see, you know, the people that spent the most time on your site, what sections did they go to? Things of that nature that you can start to dial in and start to dissect.
Yeah. Do we have that, Devin, where we could see like where somebody stops reading, or do we have access to something like that?
You'd have to dig into Google Analytics to see what you have there, to see what's exactly available on that dashboard. Certainly where some people are coming from, how much time they spend on the site, how many pages they hit on the site.
Yeah.
You know, that information is absolutely available. So, you know, we need to kind of think about some of the, you know, spend a little time poking around the data that we do have, and see if we can make that work for us.
Yeah, and I think Shelby and I have both been working on that. Like we both have the access, and I mean, I've seen like where the people are coming from and all of that stuff, but I think it'd be interesting to see and really helpful to see where they're stopping reading. Like that's something I've never thought about before, but would be extremely good to know.
And I think an average time on the site can help. I mean, as to speaking about proxies, that, I mean, if someone's spending an average time on the site of, you know, 20 seconds, how far are they getting into a story? You can extrapolate some of that information, I would think. Andrew, are there other ways to come about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I was referencing with how far, there's separate technologies for, you know, we do, you know, white papers and so forth that'll give us indications on that. I'm sure something similar is available for website, you know, traction, but I don't know enough about that to tell you more. One other idea I did have for you, though, is, you know, you may want to partner or check with the Anderson School of Management. I think they've got some analytics programs, or at minimum students that we could probably dig into some of that type of stuff for you as well, or may already be well versed in it.
Good idea. Are we tracking at all, like our social media posts and how those drive traffic and what happens with
Yeah,
that? Looking
yeah,
at
we
that?
are. Shelby actually compiles a whole list that we look at about what reach it gets, who's looking at it, all of that good stuff.
Great.
And it's, again, like the reviews and the opinions, those are doing super well. Features, stuff in the Level Perspective newsletter, those do really well. So we are looking at that.
Do you guys flip that also in terms of being able to look at social communities to kind of help gauge or guide what type of content would be good for future stories?
What do you mean by social communities?
I don't know all of the different groups that you guys have, but you know, if there's university related type of social channels that you can basically listen in, or be part of those channels to basically see what are people talking about, what, you know, what is trending, what is helpful in that regard in terms of building stories and content around that.
Yeah, that might be something. I don't think that's something we've looked into. Can you, I guess, can you elaborate more on like what kind of channels? I guess I'm a little confused.
Well, I think one example could be like Reddit. You know, is there, you know, a university club, or are there topics? And I don't know. I feel very distant from my college days, but just in terms of where do you guys hang out, Instagram wise, Reddit wise, all of that kind of stuff, and where do you see clusters of your demographic hanging out, and what are they talking about? What are they wanting to know more, and how do you connect the dots to that content into your content? At minimum, in terms of developing stories.
Yeah, I think that's something to think about. And Shelby, you're here, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, and that's something I think you could follow. But yeah, I don't think we've ever thought about that before. And I know there are like Reddit things, or the university has like a Discord server.
There you go. Yeah, totally.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was an important point, Andrew, the idea that, you know, if data is oil, you still have to process it. You have to do something with that data to make
It's
it
a raw material. Yeah.
it could be meaningful and useful.
For sure. And depending on the appetite for analytics, it's not for everybody, but for those that are interested, yeah, pursue it. But what you can do is at minimum leverage other individuals within the different, whether it's Anderson General Studies or whatever, but getting people in, I think that would be a great opportunity for you guys to ask the questions and to be able to get the data that you're looking for.
And Megan, I think what you're talking about is one of those old questions, right? Do we provide what people want to read or what information they should have, need to have, and how do you strike that balance? It's an age old question, I think.
That's right.
Great. Any other questions? I think probably the ad staff has some questions.
I think if none of the newsroom has questions, we'll transition to our regular desk meetings and get the paper started. But thank you so much, Andrew. It's nice to think about because this isn't something that comes up very often on our side of the plate. So it is important to remember that is something we should be talking about.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. It's been really fun working up to this and getting to see all you guys. Yeah, one other thing too, I don't know if you guys work with other newspapers. I just remembered that we used to have Jim, I think he used to connect us to other newspapers around the country, which was kind of fun, interesting to be able to talk to your cohorts and to talk about stuff like this and whatever other things are topical.
Yeah, I think that's happening a lot on social media now.
Yep.
In a way that it obviously didn't when we were students.
True.
Okay. Natalie and Natalie Hughes and Jordan, if you have some questions specific to ads, I think Andrew would be happy to field those for you.
Okay, yeah, I did have a question. One of the biggest things that we talk about is like managing expectations. And one thing I have found a little difficult is I think maybe this will help because I know what to expect from the analytics or how to interpret the analytics we pull. But sometimes it's managing those expectations because sometimes advertisers see, oh, they have 20,000 visitors each month. So that means I will be getting that many clicks. So how do you manage that from the beginning and also when you present it?
That's a great question. I think that goes back to your historical data, right? And that is the beauty of all this digital advertising is now you've got hard numbers to work with and you can be a lot more realistic. But part of that is being able to do all the homework and to have all of that data available to you. And you can start, with big chunks. And what I mean by that is, start with, overall for advertising is what is the general number of clicks that happen for a given edition for a given week. Then you can start to get really granular into, what is it for restaurants? What is it for hair salons? What is it for specific restaurants? It's a crawl, walk, run, right? Start with the big boulders. And then as you get better, start to bring it in and you can become very, very specific. But I think that will help you manage that.
Okay, thank you. We've talked about that before, but I guess I haven't actually thought to pull like that average and specific to each client. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
You can use some of the general data. I mean, like we were just looking at Friday at Nucinda's numbers. Like we're not going to share Nucinda's numbers with another client, but that gives you some historical data to refer to.
Actually, that's a really good point. We have benchmark studies. When I was at Zendesk, at Adobe, and now at this new company, they basically collect all this data for all different types of advertisers for all different types of customers. people are very interested, what are the industry trends? What are the overall trends and what are the industry trends? I don't have to give information about competitors, or you don't have to worry about me giving away your information. I'm giving you just overall trends, general trends, and that's being super informative, helps build the relationship, helps build trust in terms of the fact that, you know your numbers, you know what's going on, you've got that level of detail.
I did also have a question. I don't know if this is relevant at all, but is there any way that like you have found on how to get analytics from like print? Like that's one thing that like I don't know if I'm saying is clear, but just kind of like, are there any techniques that you have done to like try to see how many papers are getting read or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think that references a little bit about some of the technology. Uberflip is one company that comes to mind. So if somebody downloads a white paper, in your case, they're downloading the newspaper, that they've got built-in technologies that help understand how many quantity-wise. That's the easier part that I think a lot of companies do. But there's specialty companies like Uberflip that will tell you a lot more granular metric in terms of what people are doing within your document.
Okay, cool.
But gals, what that doesn't help you with is still the physical print copy. The only information you really have are tracking coupons
Okay.
or pickup rates, really, is there, unless there's, and Jim, you can turn on your camera and come back and join this conversation if you like.
I'm listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, physical newspapers. I don't
There's n-
I don't know enough about that.
Yeah, you can't really track or analyze in the same way. You have some broader mechanisms, of course, just kind of a general response if people are, show your ID, those kinds of things. But
Yeah, I would
but
think
everything else is digital. I mean, all the
some research.
yeah.
I would think research would help in that regard, right? Where you're calling out or you're reaching out to a certain mass of individuals and taking a survey.
I figured it was like a long shot. I didn't know if there was anything
You wanted
new technology.
the answer. And if you had to go back and sell ads today,
Yeah.
you were transplanted right back into the college newspaper world, what would you do? Would you do things differently? What would you, like, with your experience now in the world, how would you do your job?
Yeah, no, I for sure I would, just because it's a whole different realm, right? From that old example of direct mail, but there's similarities in terms of how it's kind of progressed. But I think for me, it's like going into a new job. I basically go in, I look at what do we have to work with, at what is the current processes, and what is the overall goal. So in most cases, the overall goal is a revenue. How do we increase revenue? How do we increase ads? So from that perspective, historically, where have we made the most money and where do we see the most opportunity to make more money? From that perspective, okay, now let's go look at the data available to us. So to me, all of these things always lead to the data. So going back to your Google Analytics would be, I would think, a really, really rich resource trough to basically get an understanding on. So, and in order to help speed that up, I'd get people who around me who could help me navigate that a little bit, which is where I was coming with those examples of maybe going to either within the staff, whoever has some of those skill sets, or going to Anderson or wherever on campus. That's the really cool thing, is you guys have a wealth of riches in that regard. And there's people that would do it, I'm sure, just to have the opportunity to do it.
Mhm.
Does that, yeah. And then once I did that, I basically have a reading of the landscape in context to what I'm trying to solve. And then from there, I'd say, okay, based on everything I've learned now, where do I want to take a bet? Where do I want to test? Where can I play that out a little bit. And then once I roll that out, over time, maybe 6 months, I start to have a much better indication of what's working, what's not working. And then I'm, maybe doubling down on certain categories and saying, let's go big on this.
Great. Thank you. It's interesting that the idea of special issues has been we've attempted it always throughout the years, and it's we've actually landed on a place, and of course we're printing we're printing only weekly at the moment, but the entire issue will be that special issue, which takes it. When I first joined the paper, we would have special sections, so the whole paper wasn't necessarily that. But the problem is either the ad staff will sell the heck out of it, and the editorial staff would be, kind of flailing trying to find content, or the news staff would have so much content and the ad staff would sell 2 ads, so there was always this kind of disparity. And having the whole issue be the special issue has helped take some of that pressure off, right? Because it doesn't hurt other advertisers to be in that special issue unless there's something they really dislike, which I've never seen, so.
Right. As you were speaking, I had one other idea. If there's content opportunity, what about having listening posts? And I'm take my labeling with a grain of salt, but basically within some of the different colleges, within some of the different communities, having certain individuals, and I'm talking, a handful, don't go too crazy, just out of the beginning, pick maybe 5 different individuals from different areas of campus that have some sort of a pulse on what's going on from that part of the campus, and basically telling you, what do they hear? What do they see in terms of content areas that would be of interest? Yeah, and individuals, for that matter, in terms of those being, targets for interviews or for content, additional content.
Yeah. Good idea.
I have a question. Looking back at your time at the Daily Lobo, what did you get from that, and what did you maybe gain from being at the Lobo, and what would you do differently if you were a student having that knowledge now?
My go-to with you, Jim, is always to give a smart ass response to that. Actually,
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
You know what? It was so rich. I think I knew it at the time, but it compounds, I think, over time. For me, I mean, that was the whole, I guess a little bit of extra background for those that don't know it. My father had a small ad agency in El Paso. So I thought I was going to be going into the company business or into the family business. When I got to the Daily Lobo, I got introduced to direct marketing, which was that computer, direct mail, labels, data. That was my first introduction to data and database marketing. So that opened up a whole world. That opened up a chance to win a scholarship. That essentially got me my first job. That was the launching pad for my first job, which eventually led to Apple, and basically landing over here in California. So no, it was instrumental. It was pivotal. I mean, even the chance to go to DC, going to those conferences, it was, and going back in time, I mean, we'd spend extra time for fun, just hanging out in Marin Hall. It was the life.
We do talk about the Daily Lobo family, right? So
oh my gosh.
Your cohort is your becomes your
family. As a matter of fact, I just, in this whole gig, I reached out to several people again, just wanting to reminisce.
Great. Yeah. I think each group gets pretty close.
Yeah.
Whatever side of the hall that's on.
That's right.
Yeah. That's great. And Natalie her mother sold ads for the Daily Lobo as well.
Oh, no kidding.
So we've got some generational stuff happening.
What a trip. What year was your mom?
I apologize for my background. but
Yeah.
she was there. When were you at the Lobo? At the Daily Lobo? When did you work there? Yeah. 1995. She's right here. She's eating lunch.
Very nice. I'm missing some New Mexico food right now.
Yeah, so we're and Natalie's mom Lorena came in. I got stuck in Mexico a couple weeks ago, and
Oh, wow.
Natalie's mom came in and tried to figure out our filing system and made some ads and kind of helped out and provided. I'm sure she provided moral support. I know she also provided hamburgers, and she was of great help, I think.
That is awesome.
Thanks, Mom, if she can hear me. Yeah, so.
She's in your ear.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Guys, I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Andrew, I have a question. I
Yeah.
think we have kind of, I don't know if you've signed up to be in the mentoring network, if you're interested.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah.
And the way it's kind of structured is that, folks sign up to be mentors and then they're just kind of available for questions. It's not
Yeah.
it's a network rather than a kind of a structured one-on-one kind of thing. I'll send you out some things because it would be lovely if someone had a question to be able to reach out and
Happy to do it. Happy to do it.
that would be wonderful. And then I know I told you June 10th,
Yes.
it's June 10th through 12th is going to be our next big get together. And we're going to try to do an annual celebration so that if, it's not a one and done. So
I'm going to put that on my calendar so I don't forget.
good. We'll make sure we send some information out. Are you
You said
good?
June 10th?
June 10th is a Friday, and then we'll have our big kind of June 11th. Glance up at a calendar to make sure I'm doing that right. Yes, June 11th will be our kind of our big day of, we're trying to do a panel. We're going to have our Hall of Honor dinner, do an open house at the Lobo. We're putting up a timeline, all kinds of fun things. And then we'll end on Sunday with a breakfast at Frontier, of course.
Of course.
Of course. So, yeah.
Fantastic.
Are you getting the alumni newsletter?
I am.
Okay. Perfect.
After we spoke, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Good. Well, thanks.
Thank you. Jim, good to see you again. At least
Yeah, good to see
your letters.
You're welcome.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Enjoy your Sunday.
Thanks. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you. It was good to meet you.
Cheers, guys.